Right, hi guys, it is Dan here, and today we are going to be talking about Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, and this is the second book in his sort of crime fiction slash fantasy series called The Gentleman Bastard Sequence. Now, first of all, I did actually finish this book like a week and a half ago, but I've been away on like a camping trip and I didn't get the review done before then, so apologies to my book group for missing last week's discussion. But anyway, here it is a little bit late and I'll try and keep it short for you. Right, so we rejoin Locke and Jean, who are our two sort of charming, roguish, anti-hero types a couple of years after the events of the first book in the series, The Lies of Locke Namora. And as with that book, there's a bit of sort of chronological jumping around, sort of, in the form of flashbacks. But basically, Locke has been suffering from like an extended bout of depression. Eventually, Jean manages to snap him out of it, and this does put like a severe strain on their friendship. But they pack their bags and they head off to the city of Talvarar with the intention of going to rob this massive casino known as the Sinspire. Now, after a while, their activities draw the attention not only of the owner of the Sinspire, but also of a guy known as the Archon, who kind of holds the military and naval power in the city of Talvarar. Now, this results in like a two-way struggle to please both of these influential characters, which ends up in the somewhat improbable situation that Locke and Jean are, on the orders of the Archon, have to impersonate pirate captains in this like real madcap scheme, and inevitably sort of chaos ensues from that. So, is it any good? Well, look, here's the thing, right? Yes, it is a good book, but it's a thoroughly enjoyable read. But there is a but to this, and that is that I think the book really suffers in comparison to The Lies of Locke Namora, because that was a really excellent book, whereas this is just a bloody good book, and in my sort of made up on the spot ranking system, really excellent comes above bloody good. So it hasn't quite hit the same level that Lynch managed to hit with his first book in the series. I think really Scott Lynch set the bar so high with The Lies of Locke Namora that it was going to be a struggle to reach it, particularly because the kind of genre that he's writing in is, yes, it's fantasy, but also it's this crime caper fiction, crime fiction as well. And that really, I think, lends itself more to an episodic type of narrative. Whereas, with fantasy, this is supposed to be a long series, like 7 books. This is the second one out of a proposed 7. And I think, within fantasy, you normally have these longer, more extended narratives, whereas the crime caper one, as I say, it seems it's more of a book-to-book story. So it was always going to struggle, the second book, compared to The Lies of Locke Namora, which was just brilliant. Now, I'm just going to go through some of the sort of specific issues that I had with the book, but and some of them are more important than others or whatever. But what I just wanted to remember the whole time, I'm going to sound like I'm being a little bit negative about this, but actually this was a really good book, just not quite as good as The Lies of Locke Namora, but yeah, still definitely worth a read. But, having said that, it did have some pacing issues, I thought. It's got a pretty slow start where we follow Locke just sort of moping around, being depressed, and Jean trying to deal with that whole situation. And I think that whole bit could have been dealt with in a much shorter, length of time. A fraction of the page space. Then we're sort of gradually introduced to this new setting of Talvarar, which is a different location to the first book, and that lasts, that introduction to the setting, that's maybe a third to a half of the book. But then Locke and Jean sort of get sent off to sea, and that whole bit becomes, all that world building stuff almost becomes completely irrelevant for the rest of the book until the sort of last 100 pages or so, when everything just goes mental for a bit. You know, it did feel like Scott Lynch kind of got halfway through the book and decided, I'm bored of writing in this genre, I want to write a pirate adventure instead. So there's this real flip in the sort of in the genre basically, and it was slightly jarring. I found you know, not irredeemably so, but there was definitely a bit of a feeling that it was a bit jarring for me anyway. But like I say, I did enjoy both sections. They just didn't seem to mesh together particularly well in terms of style. And I think, you know, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I think the novel would have really benefited from trimming down all of that preamble to them getting sent off to sea. They could have really, the first third of the book could have been maybe a quarter of the length it was, and then just have like a long pirate bit, because that was really fun. And I also didn't really get why the Archon would choose these two completely inexperienced in terms of, you know, seafaring capability, these two completely inexperienced criminals who are, as far as he's concerned, completely untrustworthy, to masquerade as pirate captain and first mate. But I am willing to accept that the Archon is probably not all there, and just go with it because I do like stories about pirates. So, you know, yeah, the setup was a bit flimsy, but whatever, I'm willing to let that slide. It's just worth mentioning, I think. And also, I do think that during the pirate bit, I think Lynch went... sorry about the pun, but he went a bit overboard with the sailing jargon. You know, it did imbue it with a sense of realism. I'll give him that, but I don't think it was completely necessary. And I've read plenty of sort of maritime adventures where they don't have so much of it. And I personally prefer that. I think the book flows a bit better if you don't have to know a lot of technical terms. Now, as I said earlier, it's difficult not to compare Red Seas Under Red Skies to The Lies of Locke Lamora, and kind of just see where it's not quite as masterful as that first book was. For example, I thought Talvarar wasn't really realised in as much depth as Camor was in the first book. You know, also, as I've said, the plot wasn't quite paced as well. The combination that he had in that first book of the sort of light-heartedness, but also with a really dark, seedy tone, he didn't quite manage to find the same balance as he did in Lies of Locke Lamora. But I do think, however, that the character development in this one was just as good. You know, Locke and Jean's relationship is fantastic to read, even though it's put under severe stress at points in this novel. You know, both of them undergo significant character growth. You see Locke becoming sort of, I guess, more reliant on his religion to justify some of his actions. You know, perhaps he's looking to externalise some of the guilt that he possibly feels about the fact that so many of his you know, close friends and associates died in the events of the first book. And then you've got Jean, who he really steps out of Locke's shadow a lot in this book, I think. You know, and even gets himself a love interest, which is nice to see. You've got the pirates, Drakasha and Esri, both female pirates, by the way, who are both great new characters. And what I really liked about them and their role in the story was that they really prevented the relationship focus of the book being too much about Locke and Jean's bromance. It gave it just a bit more of a wide scope, wider scope, I guess, to the relationships in the book. And the villains, you know, so I say the villains, you know, I mean Locke and Jean are villains, the pirates are villains, but you know the relative villains or whatever, like, so the owner of the Sin Spire, the Archon, you know, they are very believable, and they're proactive, and they are intelligent. So yeah, cool. You know, I think, yeah, that's a positive note. I'll end on a positive note there. Yeah, Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, as I say, doesn't quite live up to The Lies of Locke Lamora, but still definitely worth a read. If you've read the first one and you liked it, then definitely go out and read this one, because you will enjoy it. Perhaps, like me, you won't enjoy it as much as the Lies of Locke Lamora, but yeah, like I say, it was a good read, so do what you think.